The Court of Appeal has decided to throw away an injunction requiring BNZ to keep them open. BNZ attempted to stop doing business with Gloriavale 2 years ago after the community's child labour usage breached its human rights policy. John Reedy, who lived in the isolated West Coast community until his 40s, says the risk of Gloriavale shutting down is a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's the right decision. The BNZ clearly have been trying to not be facilitating human rights abuses, and I think they have a right to be able to say, no, we don't want to facilitate that. And then I guess there can be a question around, will Gloriavale claim they have changed? But that, having lived there from 0 to 40, their foundational document, and particularly the one that's the most clearest, would be what they call the Declaration of Commitment, which I like to call the Declaration to Defraud. Anyone with a rudimentary sense of fair play can read that document, and it's clearly to defraud you. So I think the BNZ is on the right track. It's been through a court. There's been other court cases proving that Gloriavale is in breach of human rights. In this case, in my opinion, having lived there for 40 years, it is nothing but a place that abuses people, to varying degrees. There's a long list of court cases to show that. And for it to continue, it will just continue to misuse people. And they've been given such a long time to reform, and they are unable to. So it kind of does need to just stop. While Gloriavale exists, it is going to misuse and exploit people. It's in their foundational documents, and you can take that to the bank.
Talking the issues you care about. Every mornings with John McDonald and Smartgrass, the artificial lawn that looks like the real thing. News Talk ZB.
Now, surely this is the final straw for Gloriavale. Or, more to the point, surely it's the final straw for the government. Because as far as I'm concerned, it is absolutely shameful that this outfit on the West Coast still exists. The final straw, by the way, if you're wondering what it is, it's the Court of Appeal ruling announced yesterday, which says the BNZ has every right to close the Gloriavale bank accounts for the simple reason that the bank doesn't want to do business with them anymore. And good on the Court of Appeal. More to the point, good on BNZ. You don't hear people saying that often, do you, about banks? But good on BNZ, which could turn out to be the outfit which does the most for those poor sods stuck over there on the West Coast. It will probably also force the hand of all those businesses on the West Coast that have been, quite happy to turn a blind eye to that terrible outfit, as long as they get to make a crust out of them, as long as they get to do business with Gloriavale. Because aside from it being a place where kids are treated like slaves, where women are treated like slaves, where women are treated like sex slaves, and Lord knows what else. Aside from all that, it's also a large business. It's a large financial entity. It includes 2 trusts and 13 companies. And there are many people who have done all right out of Gloriavale. They might not admit it, but they will. They've made money servicing the property and doing all sorts of other things that need doing at a place like that, which Gloriavale calls in people from the outside to do. But for how much longer, do you reckon? Well, the lawyer representing the people who have escaped the place and who took Gloriavale to court for ripping them off with all the crazy work hours, he's saying today that Gloriavale should pretty much be shut down today. And he's putting responsibility for that on the government. I would like nothing more than for that to happen. I would love to see the gates closed at Gloriavale by lunchtime. But I'm not sure whether the government actually has any powers to do that. We'll find that out when we talk to the lawyer for the Gloriavale leavers shortly. But either way, this has to be one of the country's greatest embarrassments. That for years now, concerns about Gloriavale have been raised, and, aside from the odd court case where creeps who have committed sex crimes have been hauled before the courts, aside from that, and aside from the Labour court ruling, aside from that, Gloriavale, or I should say despite all that, Gloriavale has been allowed to just keep on keeping on. Tick, tick, tick for all of those things I just mentioned. But is that all? It's not enough. Cops have been in to have a look. Oranga Tamariki's been there as well. But that's it. And like I say, the country needs to be ashamed. So what happened which led to yesterday's ruling is BNZ told Gloriavale, we want to shut down your accounts, we don't want to do business with you, and we've got a policy to back that up. It's called our human rights policy. And Gloriavale, they said, you can't do that. And they claimed that, if they lost their bank accounts, their whole future would be in jeopardy. How sad would that be, eh? And so Gloriavale, they went running to the High Court, and they managed to get an interim injunction which basically forced the BNZ to keep the bank accounts open. The idea being that there would be a hearing down the track to decide whether BNZ was in breach of its contract with Gloriavale with this plan to close down its bank accounts. And the BNZ wasn't going to sit around and wait for that to happen. So it went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal considered the case and released its finding yesterday, which says BNZ has every right to choose who it does and who it doesn't do business with. The fact that it has a human rights policy makes it pretty clear, I reckon, although I tell you what, I bet there will be some people going through BNZ's list of other clients to see if it's following its human rights policy to the letter and isn't just singling out Gloriavale. But I tell you what, as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't even care if the BNZ was singling out Gloriavale. I wouldn't care if they were just picking on Gloriavale because they wanted to, because I think they have every justification to pick on Gloriavale, because it's a place that needs to go. And if shutting down its bank accounts is one way to force it out of existence, then bring it on, I say. Before now, apparently the almighty leaders at Gloriavale have said that they've been trying to find another bank to work with. From what I've been reading this morning, it's unclear how much success they've had with that, which is probably one reason why the lawyer representing the ex-Gloriavale people, probably one reason why he wants the government to do its bit and intervene as well. But either way, here's my position. Gloriavale has to go. But where do you sit? Brian Henry is the lawyer representing the ex-Gloriavale people. He's with us now. Hi, Brian.
Good morning.
You want the government to step in. What powers does the government have actually to do that?
Well, can we just come back a step? The evidence is undisputed. 6-year-old boys were put to work in dangerous industrial settings. If they didn't work, they were denied food. That was the threat. And they were often severely beaten with shovel handles if they weren't working hard enough. Now, the government, in a report by the Labour Inspectorate, supported by Crown Law, said that these 6-year-old boys were volunteers. Now, I asked you, how can anybody credibly say a 6-year-old boy can be a volunteer to work like that? It's just an oxymoron. So we start at that point and we say, this place has been going for 50 years. These kids have been abused right throughout that time. And we get to a point now where the government must step in and take over and save the assets of the innocent victims in this community from the leaders. It is the leaders that are the problem. It's not the average person there. They've got powers to legislatively step in. The first is the Corporations Investigations Act, which was passed some time ago to deal with very strange institutional setups in the collapse of the 80s. That legislation is there and available. These people's life savings are at risk. And nothing changes in this community. The leaders don't change. They're the same people.
I think, Brian, that, I'm not arguing against anything you said. I mean, you used a nice word, I think it was oxymoron, whereas I just think nonsense or, BS or whatever in relation to the claims by Gloriavale. No argument from me at all. And you may not get arguments from many people listening to this right now. But if the Corporations Investigations Act is the only mechanism the government can possibly use here, it's not going to happen anytime soon, is it, this government intervention that you're calling for?
Well, it just takes one report and they appoint a statutory manager. It can be done in 48 hours. Back in the 80s, it was done to some of the organisations going broke to protect people's savings. That they moved very quickly. The first you knew about it, it was an announcement, because it's a regulation. It's not a act of parliament they need. It's just simply a report and the minister appoints a manager.
Right, so you have a statutory manager go in there. How would that stop all of the other terrible stuff that we know goes on there?
Well, the first thing is you get control of the money with any criminal organisation. Once you've got control of the money and you can control how it's spent and what it's done, you've depowered the leaders. And your situation then is to work with the victims, work with the good people inside that community who have been totally duped. And yes, it's going to require a Lake Alice-style approach where you have social workers go in and they work out how to handle and manage each family and use the assets. They say they've got 45 million. We believe they've got 65 million in assets. This is a very wealthy community, and the money's there to look after these families properly if you put in a manager who then does the right thing about the human rights of these people and looks after their savings, which are at risk.
You described it as a criminal organisation. What's the proof of that? There are people who are found to have been criminals, but it doesn't make it a criminal organisation, does it?
We know that they've used child labour. We know they've beaten child labour. That's criminal. And you can't go past that. But we also know there's huge sexual offending. There's a whole pile of males doing long jail terms now. And this has been going on for years and nothing was done until recently. We also know about the operation around the young boys and what was going on. And these are terrible situations. And the leadership knew about it, but, say 10 Hawk Marys and you're free. And they were not responding as proper, decent people. They were teaching you don't go to the police. They were teaching you don't go to authorities. And they enforced it through shunning and all sorts of quite horrible practices. At the end of the day, the organisation built itself on child labour, full stop. That to me is criminal, and that's why I call it a criminal organisation.
See, my position is that this isn't the way it's been handled up until now has been a national shame. What's your assessment?
Oh, totally. And look, the boy's judgment's now 2 years old. And what's happened? Nothing.
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 All right, Brian, appreciate your time. Thank you. That's Brian Henry, lawyer for the Gloriavale leavers. He agrees the way this country has handled Gloriavale, it is a national shame. He agrees with me. What about you? He also defines Gloriavale as a criminal organisation. Even more reason for it to go ASAP, don't you think? Morning, Pearl.
Morning.
You're a leaver from Gloriavale, are you?
Yep.
What's your view on what its future should be?
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
How can we find out if Gloriavale makes political donations?
How can you find out?
Yeah, I'm wondering how they've been so protected for the last 50 years.
Is this just an idea throwing out there, or is it something that's been talked about?
It's an idea.
Do you have any information yourself?
No, I'm asking you.
Me. I don't have the answer, but it's a very fair question because you've got to wonder why successive governments haven't done more than what they've done so far.
Mm-hmm.
When did you leave the community yourself?
3 years ago.
And what made you do it?
Protecting my children from abuse.
And what was the process like to get out of there?
It's pretty much you're in survival mode. So, yeah, it's pretty hard rebuilding a life from ground up.
You see, people are saying this morning, or some people are saying this morning, that, you can't throw 600 people out on the street by shutting the place down. What do you think would be a realistic approach if a statutory manager or commissioner or whatever was to go in there? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, I feel like as long as the government are working with the leaders, they're working with the abuse, and they need to work with the people. And if they actually went in and talked to the people, they would get a better idea of how things are actually working in there at the moment instead of what the leaders are telling them. And then they'd be able to take some control of the financial side of it. And, yeah.
You see, you might have heard me say to Therese, who called up earlier, that the thing that doesn't stack up with me is that people say Gloriavale is integrated into the community, and they provide midwifery services, and people go to the community for concerts and things. I can't imagine going to a concert and being able to drive down the driveway and head home knowing that there are kids there as young as 6 being treated as slaves. How did you feel when you were living there, when people would come for these events, and how would you feel when they left?
Oh, I felt like I was in a zoo.
Did you want to cry out and say, hey, can you stick around and help me?
I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have known what the response would have been. So, and then I guess you're always looking over your shoulder, and you don't want anyone in the community to, just be watching. You have those conversations with outsiders, because then you can be, touched on.
Which would make it difficult, wouldn't it, for what you suggested before to happen, for the government to work with the people living there themselves and not the leaders. If that was your mindset, then it'd be very difficult to get your standard residents to engage with the government or the agencies, wouldn't it?
I just assumed that if you're working in government, you're well educated and you'd be smart enough to figure it out.
It's very good. It's an interesting comment. A very good question about the political donations. I don't have an answer, but we might look into that. Thanks, Pearl.
Yeah, I'd be keen to hear about that. Thanks. Bye.
I appreciate it. Thanks for getting in touch. 9 to 10, News Talk ZB. Do you think it needs to go? Do you have enough evidence to satisfy you that Gloriavale is one of our national shames? Because I think it is. But what do you think? 0800 80 10 80 is the number to get through. And we spoke with the lawyer representing some of the Gloriavale leavers last hour, who said, well, here we are. Do you want any more evidence, government, that the time has come for you to step in and do something here? And the easy thing to do is to say, get the government in there and shut the place down right now. But that's not what the lawyer representing the leavers is saying. He's saying that there is an Act of Parliament in place which would enable the government to appoint a statutory manager. So they'd go in and take over the running of the place. We had a phone call from someone who normally lives on the West Coast who called up to say that actually Gloriavale does some good things, believe it or not. She did say, however, that some change is needed, and the 12 shepherds who are in charge of the place, who are the problem with the place, it would be wise to put in a statutory manager. So there's a couple of ideas. Commission a statutory manager for the sake of the conversation, same diff as far as I'm concerned. But what do you think? Do you think the time has come, after all the evidence that we have seen and all the claims and all the accusations, do you think that the government does need to respond in this way and appoint a statutory manager or a commissioner to take the power out of the hands of those 12 shepherds? I think the time has well and truly come. But what do you think? 0800 80 10 80 is our number. Joining us now, though, is Daniel Pilgrim, who was at Gloriavale but is no longer there and is one of those child slaves that we discussed last hour. Morning, Daniel.
How's it going, John?
Yeah, I'm great. Can you just describe what life was like for you as a young fella at Gloriavale?
Yeah, so I was It's definitely not the sort of life a child should have or would have out here. There's straight into working, probably 4 to 6 hours every day from the age of 6, and then doing pretty big weeks and suboptimal work conditions.
And that would go on, how long did that go on for you?
Well, I was in there till I was 20, but by the time I was 15, I was working 70 to 80-hour weeks.
Japers, yeah.
Doing pretty grueling work.
You see, Brian Henry, who's the lawyer representing... Is he representing you?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So he was telling us last hour, he thinks that Gloriavale is a criminal organisation, and he cited the example of what you went through not you personally, but you and your other fellow youngsters living there and working there at the time. Is that how you see it?
Definitely. I mean, if it wasn't a criminal organisation, there wouldn't be about 10 different court cases going on with them right now that they're actively fighting. I mean, they've said themselves that they wouldn't be able to operate if they were abiding by the same things that the rest of us abide by.
Which is nonsense, isn't it?
Well, of course. I mean, to a degree, they're right. They couldn't operate exactly how the rest of us do, and that's why they shouldn't exist. The whole system fundamentally is surrounded on free labour, and it's based on a whole bunch of illegal practices, and that's why it shouldn't exist any longer.
You see, I'm just thinking of any other business that brought in people from overseas and had them working to the extent that you were working. Let's take your age out of it, and not getting paid anything. I mean, they'd be out of business tomorrow, wouldn't they?
Definitely.
So can you offer...
And really they should be, because people shouldn't be doing business with them if they're doing that to people.
We had someone ring up, a Gloriavale leaver rung us up last hour and just put the question out there whether Gloriavale has made any donations to political parties and whether that's any part of an explanation as to why successive governments have been so hands-off with Gloriavale. You got any insight into that?
Oh, I have no idea.
Would it surprise you?
No, not at all. They'll do whatever they can to stay afloat and keep doing what they're doing without changing.
So what do you reckon, you've got the inside knowledge, what do you reckon is the realistic way of closing down, or what would be a realistic way of closing down Gloriavale?
Well, I think there is a lot to it, and I know people have concerns that it would be really unsettling for the people in there, but I can say from my own experience and what I understand that everyone in there would be better off if the whole place was shut down tomorrow, and that there would be enough of a support network and people around the country that would pitch in to help get all of the people in there on their feet in the real world, and that would be the best outcome possible.
How likely?
I don't think it's as bad as, it wouldn't be as dramatic as people think, because the day-to-day in there is so much worse.
So you're saying, as far as you're concerned, you don't think you'd have people chaining themselves to the buildings and refusing to leave and all of that carry on?
No.
What percentage do you think of people would be the happiest to leave?
There's always going to be some in there that are kind of sticklers and the most brainwashed and have the blinkers on the hardest. But I would say there's a good 50% of the people in there that would kind of just roll with it and be happy within a week of being out.
How much of a challenge do you think it would be for the government to appoint a statutory manager or a commissioner or whatever? And your lawyer says that there is legislation in place that would enable that. How much of a fight would that commissioner or statutory manager or whatever, how much of a fight on their hands would they have with the 12 shepherds?
Well, it'd be pretty massive, because wherever the shepherds are in there, someone like that would be pretty powerless, because the people will only listen to those people, and to those leaders, and I feel like unless the leaders at least were removed, nothing would really change.
Well, it's a tricky one. Hey, Daniel, I'll let you get back to your day job that you're being paid for. Nice to talk to you, mate. Thank you.
Too.
See you. That's Daniel Pilgrim, used to be in Gloriavale, working from the age of 6. Absolutely criminal what went on with those kids. Absolutely criminal what went on with the women in Gloriavale. And what's your position on them today, now that the Court of Appeal has given the BNZ the right to shut down their bank accounts? 0800 80 10 80. It is 19 past 10. Liz Gregory from the Gloriavale Leavers Trust has phoned in. Hi, Liz.
Good morning.
What's your reaction to yesterday's announcement by the Court of Appeal?
Oh, I think it's a pretty significant ruling. And obviously the fact that Gloriavale is struggling to find other banks to do their banking essentially proves that the BNZ had valid concerns. It's hard to know what the repercussions will be.
Because it's not terribly clear. I mean, there's been talk this morning about appointing a commissioner or a statutory manager. What's your view of that?
Well, we spent quite a lot of time last year creating a document as a trust about what would 2 different scenarios look like. What would a healthy Gloriavale look like? And actually we had a lot of input from leavers. We had focus group meetings, Zoom meetings, polls, surveys, and we collated the information and we put out a document called Hope for Gloriavale with a question mark. And there were 2 parts to it. One was, what would a healthy Gloriavale look like? What are the changes that you are wanting to see happen so that you know your family in there is safe and being looked after? And part B was, what if Gloriavale was ended? Now, it wasn't a document looking at how that ending might occur, like what might happen prior to causing an ending, but it was looking at what if it was ended? What would the process look like? What should it look like? So I thought that if you're happy, I've got a couple of things to say. What would a healthy Gloriavale look like?
Can I just check? Just check first, Liz. This is from people spoken to who aren't there at the moment, is that right?
That's correct. These are people who have left. We call them the leavers, and they have put this whole document's been compiled by them and as a representative, point of view. Yeah. About what does healthy Gloriavale look like?
Rather than read through all of that, can you just summarise it for me? What you learned, what you found out?
Absolutely, no, that's the intention. Yes, so basically they just want basic freedom for every resident: religious freedom, financial freedom, family freedom, health freedom, mobility freedom, education freedom, information freedom. And they want suitable leadership that serves the interests of residents, whether that's church leadership, civil leadership, business leadership, and the leadership needs to be accountable. And they wanted necessary repentance for past wrongs. Now, that's the level of change that leavers are asking for. So when Therese spoke this morning about Gloriavale making some changes, I'm not sure that she's got the right picture about the extent of change that leavers would like to see. And so that's a good message for Gloriavale. There's a lot of change that would need to come. And then number 2, what if Gloriavale was ended? What should that process look like? And there was general agreement, a gradual but total ending, but giving absolute clarity in an orderly phase. And I think your statutory management concept there that's being discussed probably fits within that. Number 2, accountability and justice. There's a long legacy of sad and bad outcomes, and so there's a reckoning needed involving criminal behaviour. And we're still waiting for police to make any arrests over slavery, servitude and forced labour. I'm not sure what the delay is, but we just sit here waiting. Number 3 was about spiritual preparation for resettlement, because it is a faith community. We can't overlook that most people living there have deep doctrinal beliefs. We might say they're misguided, but it actually keeps them there.
Okay, I get this. Yeah. I'm getting the picture, Liz, but how realistic are those compared to what people living there might want?
Oh, well, I think Daniel Pilgrim said that there were about 50% of people he thought that would be pretty happy, and that was the number that sprung to my head. I'd probably go higher than that now. There's a lot of unsettling that's gone on in the last 2 or 3 years. I think people are losing faith in the leadership, and I think they need to. But as far as the bank ruling goes, I think they probably think that the leaders will get them out of this one as well. Gloriavale does have a remarkable ability to survive, and so Yeah,
Can I ask you, Liz? I've got to move on. I appreciate you calling in, but I just want to ask you something. A leaver called up last hour with a question I couldn't answer, suggesting or putting some link between Gloriavale and political donations, and that might be why there's been what could be described as something of a hands-off approach by successive governments.
I heard that. Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting question. I'll be honest with you, it's a question that I've had a lot of people who have left Gloriavale ask me. And I don't know the answer, but there's something doesn't smell right around the Gloriavale situation. And so, yeah, I don't know how you can find that out. But I think it needs to be something looked into.
All right. Hey, Liz, thank you for calling. Thank you.
Gloriavale has lost the battle against BNZ. Janae Tipstrani is with me. She is the Herald's Wellington business editor. Janae, good evening.
Hey, Ryan.
Good to have you on the show. Tell me about you've been speaking to Gloriavale's lawyer. Are they going to take this further? Are they going to take further action about the decision from the BNZ?
Look, I've actually been talking to the chief executive of the trust behind Gloriavale. That's the Christian Church Community Trust. A man called Phil Jameson. He's not actually in Gloriavale, but he is helping manage Gloriavale's affairs. Now, Phil said to me, and I quote, "It will not be the end of the community." He is fairly adamant that Gloriavale will be able to find an alternative once BNZ closes its accounts in 3 months' time. That seems to be the current plan. So Phil wouldn't give away too much. He said these are commercial, decisions that, or commercially sensitive information. But he said Gloriavale was actively pursuing a range of options. I asked him, well, could Gloriavale get an overseas bank to deal with it? And he said that was highly unlikely. The thing here is that you would imagine that Gloriavale does need a bank. Its net assets are worth at least $47 million. That's a lot of money, and it needs somewhere to put its money, and it needs to be able to transact to keep its various commercial farming entities going, keep the people fed and the kids educated and laundry going and all that type of thing.
Yeah.
John Reddy has the last word.
While Gloriavale exists, it is going to misuse and exploit people. It's in their foundational documents, and you can take that to the bank